Good morning, lovelies. I finally figured out how the new microphone works. Oh, mostly, sort of. We're working on it. Anyway, I'm answering your most common writing questions because I have been writing for a lot longer than I have been making videos, so I actually kind of sort of know what I'm talking about there. Last time we talked about story ideas and motivation. Today it's all about plotting and pacing, so let's get to it. Before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. My latest fantasy novel, The Witch Who Trades with Death, is available in all book formats through the link in the description, as is my science fiction novel, Citadel, of which I'm currently working on the sequel, Demon's Nest. I've got more stuff on my website and, of course, my CaFae Latte series on TikTok. That book, Heart of Iron, that comes out in October. I will let you know as soon as I have a pre-order link for you. Question the first. How do you start a novel? Now, I'm assuming that this question is, what do you put in the first chapter, or even the prologue? Now, there is a lot of pressure these days to have a snappy opener, that you have to grab people's attention with the very first line and never let it go. While it is true that our attention spans are shot all the way to hell these days, the truth is that the people who sit down to read books are already prepared for a long haul. The first line doesn't have to be a brilliant thesis that encompasses the whole book. I mean, it's cool if it is, but it's not necessary. This trend is a large departure from the old school fantasy and sci-fi books that hit you with a ton of exposition in the first chapter, or even the first several chapters. The reasoning behind this made sense. You want the audience to understand the world before you drop them into it. But these days, we have developed better techniques at giving exposition throughout the novel, which I will get into during this video. You guys had a lot of exposition questions. Ideally, you would find a nice middle ground. Chapter 1 is designed to introduce the reader to your main character and the world that they live in. Their ordinary world, if you want to get technical. The end of that chapter is usually the inciting incident. Katniss's sister gets picked for the Hunger Games. The Chosen One's village is burned down. The leading lady has the meet cute with her love interest. Or her soon-to-be evil ex just broke up with her, motivating her to move to a new city or go to law school. The detective gets the case. The family closes the sale on a house that totally isn't haunted, etc. For those of you who read Citadel, you may note that I did not do this, all right? And as such, a lot of the criticism that I got for this book is that the beginning is slow. Now, this was my debut novel, so I was still kind of figuring things out. A lot of exposition was needed because this is such a weird alien world. And full disclosure, I still haven't quite mastered the art of how to do that yet. Even my Blackwing novellas have relatively slow starts, so it's definitely a work in progress. Exposition is something that every author struggles with, no matter how long they've been doing this, especially if it's needed at the start. It's one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge, to writing fantasy and sci-fi. The Witch Who Trades with Death is structured a little better, although this chapter 1 is in medias res. That's the fancy way of saying that I started in the middle of the story and then flashbacked a year. By the time Act 1 is finished, we're all caught up. I went that route for a variety of reasons. Structurally speaking, it takes a little while for Kana to lose her only friend in the Imperial Court, murder the killer, escape the court, and make it to the town of Pahuda. While the friend's death would make a good inciting incident, since it kicks off everything else, she had too much information to squeeze into a single chapter, especially chapter 1. We needed more time with her, as well as more time with the villain and his right-hand lady that Kana ends up killing. The other, and biggest reason, is that Kana's life in the Imperial Court is that of a concubine. More accurately, she's a sex slave. And I wanted the reader to know out the gate, don't worry, she doesn't stay here long. We're only going to spend a few chapters here and then we're out. So chapter 1 has Kana already escaped to Pahuda. Her secret magic has already been revealed and is being taken advantage of. She's made a couple of friends, but now the evil emperor that she's escaped has tracked her down and is getting ready to invade. That is the inciting incident, the invasion. So that had to be the end of chapter 1. And since that's already pretty far into Kana's story, it made sense to have chapter 1 be in medias res and then spend the rest of Act 1 in a flashback catching up to that point, giving us the proper background and exposition we need to understand what's going to happen next without boring the reader. That's good for chapter 1, but what if you want a prologue? Prologues are not always necessary. They're very common, especially in fantasy and sci-fi, but that doesn't make them a requirement. which doesn't have a prologue because it doesn't need one. Citadel does. Citadel's prologue is the death of Elias, who is the boyfriend of the main character, Olivia. He's killed by Chimera a year before Olivia's story starts, and is a major reason why she ends up going to the forest on her own, which is the whole plot. The prologue was designed to do a few things. It helped introduce the alien world, although it's relegated to just setting at this point. It introduced the reader to the conflict between humans and demons, or Chimera. It gives us stakes. Elias is killed along with his best friend, meaning other characters aren't safe either. It gives a key component of the main character's backstory and motivation, which was the most important thing. And bonus, it gives us a description of the specific Chimera that killed Elias, which is a fun bit of dramatic irony when Olivia meets him later, but doesn't know that it's him, and he doesn't know that it's her. They have no idea about their connection. For your first draft, just pick a point that feels natural and start writing. You can figure out in the revisions or rewrites whether it needs to be faster or slower. If you want a basic structure just to get you started, then the first chapter should start with introducing the main character and their world, and then end it on a change. You establish reality, you take it away. It's a simple 1-2 punch. How do you decide what scenes or parts need to be cut out? And on a related note, how do you cut a scene that you really love, but it doesn't move the story forward? This is called killing your darlings, and it can be very difficult. There are a few ways to go about this. One of the best ways to do this is to give yourself time. Have you ever gone through your old art projects from like when you were in kindergarten or elementary school, and while you were so proud of drawing that portrait or dog or whatever, you look at it now as a teenager or an adult and you go, wow, this looks like shit. Time has given you emotional distance from your art, allowing you to see things more objectively. Set the manuscript aside after you finished it for at least a month, preferably more. That gives you some emotional distance and a fresh set of eyes, and you can more objectively see what parts need rewriting and what needs cutting or adding. At every scene, every chapter, you need to ask yourself, why is this here? What does this scene do for the story? Is it necessary for the story? Basically, if you can delete it and still perfectly understand the rest of the story, delete it. Sometimes this scene gives important exposition, but it drags the pacing down, at which point you save the exposition and then you delete the scene. Find somewhere else in the manuscript to put that information, or rewrite the scene entirely to be faster and more exciting. This can be really difficult, especially if you're one of those people who worries that you'll regret deleting this later. If this is you, I recommend that you open a blank Word document. When you come across a scene that, say, you really love, but it doesn't move the story forward, copy and paste it onto that Word document, and then delete it from the manuscript. This allows you to keep the scene in a different file so that if you do realize, oh, wait, I can actually keep this, or I really need this paragraph or two for the exposition in this chapter instead, you could just copy and paste. You're not losing anything, you're just moving it. It also offers some cool bonus content. Fans love seeing deleted scenes, so put it in your Patreon or something. How do you create the scenes in between the major plot points, like the fillers and transitions? On a related note, how do you do pacing? This is where outlining really comes in handy. For me, anyway. The biggest plot points of any novel are usually the ordinary world, that's chapter 1, the catalyst or inciting incident, usually the end of chapter 1, start of chapter 2, the midpoint, the lowest point, often the end of Act 2, and the climax, which is the entirety of Act 3. If you can figure out those ahead of time, then getting the characters from point A to B to C becomes a lot easier. Let's say your midpoint involves the characters getting a MacGuffin. This is where Maui's fishhook was retrieved in Moana. That was the midpoint. So the scenes between the inciting incident and the midpoint will likely involve the characters learning about that MacGuffin, why they need it, and then traveling there. You, as the author, can then ask yourself, how can I make this even harder for them? Maybe they're fugitives, so that makes traveling much more dangerous and difficult. You can have them sneaking around, stealing supplies, maybe even a fight or chase scene. If they're in the open ocean, this is where they run into coconut pirates. Oh, and also the demigod that our hero needs to recruit to do the thing does not want to do the thing, which makes it harder for her, but easier for you as the writer because it's easy transition. In Citadel, the MacGuffin is the answer to Olivia's question. What started the war between Chimera and humans? Who started it and why? It's not really a MacGuffin because hopefully by then the audience also cares about that, but semantics. The ancestral memory scene is the midpoint. That's the point. But in order to get that information, Olivia first has to get into the flooded forest, which is full of environmental dangers and monsters, try to find a chimera who won't kill her straight away, escape from the chimera who do try to kill her, figure out how to communicate with them because she's nonverbal and so are they, and then she has to do a favor for one of them, saving a child that has fallen into a cave that has a predator in it and nobody else can fit. Those are all transition scenes between the inciting incident and the midpoint. I basically just added as many hoops as possible between Olivia and her goal that I could get away with. And then I did the same thing between the midpoint and the lowest point when her goal was getting back to Citadel in one piece. Pacing is tricky and honestly best discussed on a case-by-case basis, but it usually comes down to just a 2-bit pattern. Something happens in one scene, and the characters react to it in the next. Back and forth, at least up to the climax. Your last act probably won't have time for character reaction until the resolution, the very, very end. We see this happen in Mulan, the original Disney version, not the unnecessary live action that I still haven't seen and don't intend to. The opener is the Huns invade China, which makes no sense because they were on the other side of Eurasia, but whatever. And the emperor reacts by conscripting the masses. Mulan is her chaotic self, and her family reacts by turning her into the perfect bride in the song You'll Bring Honor to Us All. Mulan has her disastrous matchmaker session, she reacts with sadness, and then her father reacts by cheering her up. Her father is conscripted. Everyone in the family gets an emotional response. He is resigned but determined, Mulan is angry, the mom is sad, there's an argument. Mulan takes her father's place in the army, the family reacts, both the living and the dead, bringing in Mushu. And that takes us into Act 2, where the pattern continues. That's the pattern. Something happens, characters react. Then a new something happens, probably in response to the characters' reactions, but it's usually a little more intense. An escalation, if you will. This is a really simple way to structure a story until you can make it flow more seamlessly in edits. Again, I find it a lot easier to outline, as do most authors that I know, so I'd give that a try if you haven't already. Speaking of, how much do you plan versus pants? How much say do the characters get in the story? And how do you outline? So I am a very big planner. I plan everything before I start writing. The plot, the characters, the world, all of it. Part of this is because I'm building entire worlds, and I don't want to break my momentum in the rough draft to figure out this fantasy city's water supply. If I know I'm going to need that information, I want it already prepared, so I can just look it up when I get there. I also write a lot of diverse characters from groups that I am not a part of, so a lot of my planning is researching them. I am not autistic, so I had to do a lot of research into what autism is, the community's history and current issues, day-to-day life, and mistakes made by previous allistic authors that I wanted to avoid. And mentally speaking, it's just really nice to have that parachute there. I don't have to wonder, what am I going to write about today, or how am I going to get the characters from the inciting incident to the midpoint, because I've already figured that out, even if I end up changing it. And yes, I do often change my outline while writing the draft. I get new ideas, I learn new things that I want to incorporate in the story, or I realize that the way I've written these characters doesn't make sense for where I planned on them going, so I'll change the end of the outline. Sometimes I have to rewrite the whole goddamn manuscript, like what I've done with Demon's Nest at least twice. Originally, Ormus was supposed to remain in Citadel, disgraced but alive, but then I realized that I established Augustus as too smart in the last book, and he'd at least try to execute him immediately. Since that became the new inciting incident, or at least one of them, I had to scrap what I'd already written and start all over. Twice. Because my stories are very character-driven, they do get a say in the story. Although I'm pretty good at figuring them out ahead of time, sometimes I realize that I got it wrong as I'm actively writing and have to change the plan. Which is fine. People are unpredictable, and if my characters are doing that, then I'm probably doing something right. As for how I outline, I mentioned the most important plot points of a story in the last question. Ordinary world, inciting incident, midpoint, lowest point, catalyst. I usually figure those out first, and then I fill in the blanks. And like any skill, it gets easier with practice. How do you world build? How do you exposit your world to the reader? Do you world build before or while you write the story? And what comes first, world building or plotting or outlining the story? Y'all had a lot of world building questions. So I tend to world build and create characters, or at least the major characters, before I outline. And that is largely because I tend to come up with the world and characters first when I get an idea for a story. I might have some idea of what the plot will look like, that's tertiary. I don't do all of the world building before I outline, but I do the most important parts. Who's in charge and how? Where are people getting their food? How well are people protected from things like invaders, crime, and disease? What are the main religions in this area, and how does that affect their day-to-day lives? What types of prejudices exist? And how obvious do I want to be with real-world parallels? I have a bachelor's degree in history and social justice, so this whole thing is my jam. In Citadel, I knew that I needed my female, atheist, nonverbal autistic main character to be an outsider, almost a pariah. So the town had to stand for everything that she is against. They're patriarchal, dogmatic, ableist, all of that. I built Olivia and Citadel at the same time because they had to be polar opposites of each other. And because I was playing around with gender roles, she and Riley were being built at the same time too, as complementary. She's a closed-off loner, he's an empathetic people person. She's aggressive and in your face, he is quiet and more passive. She's a fighter, he's a healer. She's atheist, he's faithful, but he's the good side of Citadel's faith. They foil each other. And Riley also foils his father. Riley is healthy masculinity and religion. Augustus is toxic. Olivia's father, Ormus, starts off more toxic and has this whole arc where he becomes healthier, making him foil to both. All of this was being built at about the same time. People affect their environment and the environment affects people. Once I had that balance figured out, then I could properly outline. Any small details I missed, like specific creatures of the flooded forest, or how Citadel makes its plates and cutleries, all of that could be figured out either as I wrote, or I could kind of leave it blank and save it for revisions. As for expositing, let's get to the last questions. How do you do exposition? And related, what's your advice on show, don't tell? As I said, exposition is tricky. All right, there are a lot of tools and techniques that you could try, and I highly recommend that you check out Hello Future Me's video on the subject. He breaks it down really well, and it has just some great ideas. The general rule of thumb is that you hold off on giving exposition until the very last minute. So if your reader needs to know how magic works in, say, Chapter 7, when there is a magic duel or monster fight, you don't give them those specifics until Chapter 6. Maybe Chapter 5. As for how you tell the reader about the magic in those chapters, well, that depends on you and the vibe of your book. The easiest way is to just tell the reader, which you could maybe get away with if it takes place in like a school environment. See, this is why the main characters are often very new to this magical world, because it's the easiest way to justify telling them the rules in the narrative. But ideally, the exposition itself would not be the focus of the scene. The focus should be on the character doing something, or trying to do something, while the exposition is in the background. So let's take this classroom example. The teacher is telling students about the specifics of magic that is going to come into play in the next chapter or two. If the main character is a student, maybe they're trying to pass a note to their friend without getting caught. Or they're trying to pass that note to their crush and ask them out. Maybe there's a divorce going on back home, and instead of taking notes in their binder, they're instead trying to figure out whether to stay with mom or dad, charting the pros and cons of both. Or they've got a stain on their brand new shirt, and the bullies are making fun of them for it. All the while, that teacher is expositing in the background. They're giving that dialogue. The reader is learning what they need to learn, but the focus is on the student character trying to do a thing. And the tension in that scene is whether or not they succeed. Do they get away with passing that note? Do they decide to stay with mom or dad? Do they get away from the bullies? That's the focus. The exposition is secondary. If the main character is the teacher, maybe they're working on autopilot while thinking about something that happened in the last chapter. A monster has just broken out, and they're trying to decide how to update the security system. They've been told that one of their coworkers or students is a spy, and they're trying to figure out which one it is. They've got a crush on their coworker, or maybe even a date, and so they're like rushing through this lesson a little bit, and they get annoyed when a student slows them down by asking a question or passing notes. Or maybe they're a substitute teacher and have no idea what the subject material is supposed to be, and so they're trying to figure it out with the students while maintaining their authority over a bunch of hormonal teenagers who have problems with authority. Notice how the information about the magic is never the center of this scene, because most of the time readers don't really care about exposition. They care about characters, and they're going to be a lot more interested in what they're doing, what their goals are, and whether or not they'll achieve them than your 3-page essay on your unique magic system. Sorry. You should also consider who is giving this information. Does the narrator even believe in magic? Maybe this scene is more about characterization, like the main character is a father telling his kid a bedtime story from his own childhood, and he clearly thinks that none of this magic stuff is real, and he just wants the kid to go the fuck to sleep so he can watch the latest House of the Dragon episode in peace. Look at that! We've got characterization for at least two characters, the relationship with each other, and exposition into magic that'll become relevant later. Another possibility is putting the characters in a situation where they need that exposition, but either the information is not there or it's contradictory. Maybe there's a monster running loose and two monster hunters are after it, but they disagree on the best way to take the monster down and are arguing about this while hunting it or while trying not to get caught by it. One of them just wants to shoot it, and the other one points out that the hide is too tough, especially for mortal bullets. Well, what about a shotgun fired 2 inches from its face? Well, no, because it regenerates, idiot. Well, not if you cauterize the wound quickly enough. If you burn that here, the whole house will go up in flames. In that instance, we're not only getting exposition, but a tense action scene and characterization. You want to look for opportunities to fold exposition into scenes that already have a clear purpose. Usually that information will be background noise, but sometimes, like with our monster hunting scene, you can find a way to make it the centerpiece of a more tense sequence. If a character's peanut allergy is really important to the midpoint or climax, then the exposition can be either a couple of lines of dialogue when a character notices their EpiPen in their bag, or a whole scene centered around an allergic reaction that freaks everyone out and impacts the story in additional ways. It depends on what else you have going on in the story and the type of tone you want to set. All of these examples, by the way, have been mostly show, don't tell. Sometimes you do straight up have to tell the reader information, like with our classroom scene, but you can also show them something more entertaining that also delivers information. It's very much a magic trick. Distract and redirect. Most of the time when it comes to exposition, you want to show, don't tell. Don't tell the reader this character lives in poverty. Show them doing mental math in the grocery store to figure out if their paycheck and SNAP is enough for the ingredients to a dish they want to make for their kid's birthday. Don't say this character's marriage is in trouble. Show him sleeping on the couch, or the pillow wall between him and his wife, and cold, frigid way they speak to each other before going to work. Don't say Kana's magic is hated but needed in this town. Show her being pulled from her bed in the middle of the night to heal a man in secret. Have the patient's family disrespect her. Have him tell her to use the back door so no one sees her. If you can show instead of tell, do it. However, there is a way to just tell the readers the information without boring them to tears, and that is with a mystery. Take The Matrix. One of the most iconic scenes in that movie is just Morpheus and Neo sitting down and talking. Not even, it's just Morpheus giving exposition about the Matrix. Why is it so fascinating, and why do we care? Well, it's because the entire movie up to this point has been designed to get us to ask the same question Neo is asking. What is the Matrix? We don't know. No one will tell us. We just know that it's important to Neo, that there are some sort of government officials with creepy robot bugs, so maybe there's some sort of national conspiracy going on. It can make Trinity jump over rooftops and teleport out of phone booths. What the fuck is going on? By the time Morpheus finally shows up and is like, let me tell you about the Matrix, everyone watching is like, finally, some goddamn answers. You see this play out on a larger scale with mystery stories. Most of the time, the climax of the story, the most intense part, is just people expositing information. But because it's information that we've been craving for the last 300 pages, we don't care. We just want those facts. I'll say it again. Exposition is hard. It really should have its own video, but those are the pieces of advice that I have found particularly helpful. Every story is unique, so you've got to do a case-by-case basis. That is all for today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.
In the forest deep, where shadows creep, Fae wings whisper secrets in the night. A journey starts with a single step, softened footprints under moonlight. Whispered words of ancient prophecy fade in the wind like a melody. She walks the path with courage fierce, through tangled woods she will pierce. She's a daughter of the stars, breaking breaking chains and healing scars. A prophecy in every heartbeat. In her strength, fate's true deceit. Dancing with shadows of the moon, her spirit rises with a tune. Every turn a story told, in a world she's fate to hold. Empowered magic in her veins, breaking free from binding chains. Her voice an anthem in the trees, her journey wild and free. She's a daughter of the stars, breaking chains and healing scars. A prophecy in every heartbeat. In her strength, fate's true deceit. Breaking chains and healing scars. A prophecy in every heartbeat. In her strength, fate's true deceit. In the shadows where the night is young, whispered secrets where the tales begun. Moonlit realms where fantasies rise, eyes that see through crooked skies. Glimmering paths where the willows weep, lost in dreams that we secretly keep. Echoes of laughter turn into sighs, searching for truths in shadowy ties. Oh, the strange sight in the midnight haze, where the fairies dance in their timeless days. Mystery weaves in the silver skies. Witness the strange sight uprise. Soft tears fall from the twilight's yawn, winds that mourn for their dreams long gone. The silent winds through the midnight blue, secrets told by the foggy skies. Glimmering paths where the willows weep, lost in dreams that we secretly keep. Echoes of laughter turn into sighs, searching for truths in shadowy ties. Oh, the strange sight in the midnight haze, where the fairies dance in their timeless days. Mystery weaves in the silver skies. Witness the strange sight uprise. Oh, the strange sight in the midnight haze, where the fairies dance in their timeless days. Mystery weaves in the silver skies. Witness the strange sight uprise. Oh, the strange sight in the midnight haze, where the fairies dance in their timeless maze. Mystery weaves in the silver skies. Witness the strange sight uprise.